I'm Rosa Guixens. I'm the executive director of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, the memorial itself.
So the organization just created the 2024 Fatalities Report. What kind of work is put into that for the whole year?
So it's a lot of work and it's a lot of record keeping and things like that throughout the year. We have officers we process the cases of officers that are killed in the line of duty that are presented to us, which a fair amount of work goes into that and research and everything else. This year we had 147 line of duty deaths within 2024, which is a 25% increase from last year. Of those 147, 52 were gunfire fatalities, which sadly is also an increase from last year, about 13%. And we also had the next category is car crashes. That was an increase of 48% from last year with a total of 46. So pretty much in every category, we have sadly seen an increase.
What is it like for you to be working with fellow police officers in getting this information out there?
So we deal a lot with the chiefs of the departments, with the families when we try to get all the documents and everything that we need. There's a fair amount of work that goes into that, and our researchers handle that. It pulls on your heartstrings for sure because we deal mostly with death, and it's tragic loss. I mean, everybody, you go to work in the morning expecting to come home at night, and all the officers that we're dealing with, for the most part, we do have some positive events throughout the year, but this is our main focus is to honor them and to remember them, memorialize them. So 90% of what we do is dealing with fallen police officers, which definitely can weigh on you. There's no question.
This past year, I went to the vigil, and it's so powerful. And what you do is so great when you recognize the fallen. Uh, how is it, when you realize how many names you're going to be putting on the wall for the year?
Yeah, it can be definitely very overwhelming. Thank you for coming and thank you for attending. We definitely appreciate the support, and I know the families appreciate people coming out and supporting as well. But yeah, a lot of work goes into that. It looks like this year we're going to be around in the number of names that are going to be added to include historical deaths. Probably around 240-ish. I don't have a final number yet, but it's going to be, quite a number. Last year we did 283. So a lot of work goes into that, a lot of planning. Obviously, putting together the candlelight visual itself is a work, a lot of organizing. But it's worth it, and it's, everything we can do to help support these families, support the survivors, and memorialize these officers that have given everything.
So after the report comes out, what are some of the next steps with the data?
We try to look to see if there's any real trends, if there's specific training that can be put together to work with officers, try to keep them safer. One of our pillars is officer safety and wellness, and we try to make it safer for those who serve. And we travel the nation, putting together seminars and different types of training, lectures, as well as other trainings that go on throughout the nation that departments take advantage of, to because it's really what you have. You have to depend on your training to try to survive. One of them is surviving the stop. Like I said earlier, we have one of our categories within our traffic related fatalities is struck bys, and we had 17 officers last year in 2024 that were killed by struck bys, meaning they were not in their cruisers, they were on the side of the road outside of their car, whether it be pulling traffic and happened to be outside of their car, they were handling a different crash. There's just different instances where they're outside, but that increased 113% from last year. So we saw a huge jump there, and a lot of that is attributed to distracted driving, impaired driving, people not minding the move over laws in states that do have that law. So it's tough. It's scary, and it's hard to, we don't have eyes on the back of our head, so it's hard to see what's coming up behind us. And oftentimes when you hear it or the officers hear it, it's too late for them to react and try to get out of the way. It's tough.
And for you, what inspired you to become a police officer?
Oh, um, I don't know. That was a really long time ago. I think that part of what inspired me is being outside, working with people. Every day was different, or is, was different. I didn't necessarily want to be behind a desk and working Monday through Friday. I had a wonderful 30-year career in law enforcement, starting back in 1993. And I've been very fortunate. I've lost a lot of very good friends whose names are on the wall out there. But I really I've been very fortunate to have a great career, and I feel like this is how I'm wrapping up my professional career here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial.
So for you, what does the rest of this year look like with the vigil and police week and everything?
Oh, lots of planning. We got to get through this and figure out, how we're going to wrap up these last few weeks, figuring out the number of names, and then we have to plan spatially where the names are going to go on the memorial itself. In April, usually by April, we begin the engraving process so that everything is ready to go come police week, beginning May, middle of May. The vigil is always held on May 13th. But there's a lot of things that go into that week, and a lot of planning. I mean, we started planning really, I guess, November a little bit, and December, and now really we start getting busy with moving forward with the vigil and all the other activities that transpire during Police Week.
What do you want police departments to take away from your findings?
I mean, to just be safe, be aware. I think everybody knows right now we're still under this somewhat of an anti-police rhetoric. I definitely think it's getting better. The pendulum is beginning to swing more in our direction, little by little, and the defund movement is sort of dying down. So that's good. Hopefully, it will improve again this year. But just be safe. Rely on your training. Wait for your backup. You know, um, I don't know what else to say. Just be safe and look out for each other.
Troy Anderson, Executive Director of Officer Safety and Wellness at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund.
Can you tell me a little bit about your safety and wellness program?
Certainly. So the way the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund is divided up, if you will, is in three separate distinct pillars. So the first one that most people are familiar with is the memorial. The second one being the National Law Enforcement Museum. And the third pillar, the one that I oversee, is Officer Safety and Wellness. And as part of that, especially as we're talking about right now, the end of year preliminary fatality report, what we do is we take that fatality information, we examine that data, and then we create programs in response to that, solutions, if you will, because we have a twofold mission in officer safety and wellness. Number one is to make it safer for those who serve. The second portion of that being keeping names off the memorial wall. And we do that through a number of different programs. We work with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration through a cooperative agreement where we look at traffic officer fatality data, and we examine that data and we figure out what is killing our officers nationally. So as you look at that and you look at some of the statistical analysis that comes out of that, you sort of see emerging trends. And what we do is address those emerging trends by creating programs that drive those numbers down. So that's what we look at. So it's not just our work with NHTSA. We work with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research, proctoring a program by the name of Safe Leo, which is suicide awareness for law enforcement officers, where our objective is to drive the number of law enforcement suicides down to zero. We have a program called Destination Zero, which is a flagship program, which is really a best practice program. So what we do is we look at programs around the nation, law enforcement organizations that really have gone far and above, really sort of risen to the top, spearheading efforts in officer safety and wellness practices. And they compete through a very robust process to win the title, if you will, in one of 5 separate categories. I would encourage anybody who's listening, whether you're in law enforcement or not, to visit our National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial website at nleomf.org and go to the Officer Safety and Wellness section and really examine some of the programs. Take a look at our resource library because it's very robust.
Yeah, and as a police officer, you're probably a part of someone's worst day ever, and you got to be strong about that. So, how important is it for police to have a support system to help them when they're going through these terrible things?
Well, law enforcement officers are exposed to numerous traumas in their
Yeah.
career, and they see things that people shouldn't have to see or be experiencing or be exposed to repeatedly throughout their career. So it's paramount. It's of paramount importance to really start the process of indoctrination into understanding wellness and resilience early in your career. In fact, in the agency that I came from, it started in the academy. So we would come in and we would talk about these very predictable universal signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress, not just how it's going to make you feel, but we talk to their families and let them know what they may experience as well. And then we tell them what process we follow, what resources we have available. So whether that's through doing debriefings or diffusings or interventions, whether that's through having a chaplaincy program, whether that's through having a peer support program where you can have one-on-one confidential conversations. There are a tremendous amount of resources, not to mention the fact that every officer in this country who has health insurance, if you flip the card over, you have a behavioral health number on the back where you can go and really feel with 100% that you're going to have anonymity. Your clinician is not going to be exchanging information with your department. So what we're really trying to do when we look at this is eliminate any obstacles, any barriers. And I think we sort of look at that collectively in the in the wellness field as perhaps our biggest barrier is to knock down anything that is in the way of officers getting treatment, because there's a stigma, and I think that that word is pretty universally acceptable. There's a stigma, and I would tell you, getting in law enforcement back in the 1980s when I came in, the stigma was much greater. I think if you were sitting in a roll call or a briefing back in the 1980s and you would not be sitting openly talking to your coworkers about how you and your significant other may be going through marriage and family counseling. You wouldn't be talking about that back then. But now I think that that's much more acceptable. There are people that talk about their feelings. One of the things that I've always found kind of ironic is you look at the firefighter service. They are much healthier for a reason, and that is the normalization of their exposure to bad events. So when you look at what the fire folks do, and I'm not professing to know exactly what they do, but I know this. They go to a call together, they go back to the firehouse together, and then they sit down at the table and they talk. They talk about what this experience was. Just that talk normalizes it, because your experience may be different from mine. But in law enforcement, we tend to get back into a patrol car, into a cruiser, and you go from call to call to call. So unless your department has a policy or a procedure or a protocol that sort of provides that, let's say a debriefing, for example, where everybody can sit around in a room, all people in a homogeneous group that were exposed to the exact same event, and we can talk about what our role was, and then we can talk about what the worst part was for us. But then as you talk through that, you also realize that other people are experiencing this event in similar ways and maybe even in different ways. And sometimes talking about it and hearing what other people's exposure was and how it affected them emotionally allows you to begin that healing process as well, because it's normalized at that point. No longer do you feel like the lone ranger. Now you feel like somebody who's been part of a group event, and I was just a portion of that. It wasn't all just my exposure and my experience. So I think that we've seen a huge paradigm shift over the past few years, certainly over the last, let's say, 20 years, where these peer support and chaplaincy programs and critical incident stress management have really sort of gelled. And what the one thing that I think is a great takeaway for anybody who's in law enforcement here is you do not have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to these programs. And I think there's a misnomer out there that you have to have this tremendous budget in order to be able to implement these programs, and you don't. It's important to look at resources like our resources. Call us up. send us an email, ask us the questions, and we can connect you to other organizations, other police law enforcement agencies who have put together really great programs because they had the courage to look around at the departments around them and sort of pick from that what would be the best application for their agency.
And I live with bipolar disorder too. And when I talk to people with lived experiences where I kind of gravitate towards because they know uh, what I'm going through. And as police officers, how important is it to have other police officers with lived experiences so they know they're not alone?
Well, I can tell you that it's more important than you can imagine. As somebody who ran a statewide peer support program for a number of years, for over a decade, one of the things that we looked for with the folks that were coming to us to be peer support people is not everybody had to have a perfect past. We wanted folks that were a part of our peer support team that maybe had been through an internal affairs investigation. Maybe we wanted somebody on that team who had been involved in a deadly use of force event. We wanted people who had had lived and shared experiences throughout their career, both in personal and professional lives, to come to be a part of that program to really augment. Because, Michael, you're going to be drawn toward people who have had that experience because they know where you've been. They speak your language. They've seen what you've seen. So by having those people on the team, it really lends a tremendous amount of credibility to the work that we were doing.
How does it feel for you to be helping police officers in this capacity?
I'll tell you that there is no greater calling, at least for me in my career, is to help the helper. I realized years ago when I came into an agency, and it was a statewide agency that had been around since 1903, and there weren't a lot of changes that had happened over the years. Yes, we weren't carrying revolvers anymore, and everybody wasn't riding a motorcycle to work, but the reality was we hadn't evolved fully. And I started to see throughout my career, I saw people that sort of fell through the cracks. And I realized that the program that we had in place, which was simply an external employee assistance program, it wasn't enough because there was a we'll call it a stigma, but there was a real feeling. It was a perception. I don't think it was a reality, but there was a feeling that these employee assistance program employees were sharing information with management. I don't think that that was happening, and I have no firsthand knowledge of it happening. But once there's a perception, that perception becomes a reality. So for those people that didn't want to use the employee assistance program, what else was there? And the answer was really nothing back then. So it is incredibly important to me because I have seen the work that I do and that my team has done and that I continue to do with my folks at the fund. I have seen it save lives. I've seen these programs actually save lives. So in order to look at a law enforcement person, man or woman, going through a career 20, 25, or 30 years, it's not just enough to get them through. We would all presume that when they arrived at this profession, they were mentally and physically on top of their game. So why is it that at the end of the career, many of these folks are unrecognizable spiritually, psychologically, right? They're not the same people. And why is that? And should we accept that? And the answer is no. That's not acceptable, especially if we know too much to get it wrong this time. So it's important to have these programs in place. It's important to take care of your people. You can never have enough officer safety and wellness. And we continue our efforts every day to not only build new programs, but proliferate the existing programs to make them better and more robust.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Well, I'll tell you that years ago, I made a commitment to myself that I would go once a year, whether I felt like I needed it or not, and just check in with a clinician. I said, who would I be? What kind of hypocrite would I be to tell other people to go check in with a clinician and not do it myself? And of course, once I did it the first time, I realized it shouldn't be a once a year thing. And I made sure that I upped that. And especially after being exposed to a number of traumatic events over the course of my career, both personal and professional, I saw the inherent benefit of doing that, and I continued it and continue it today. It's incredibly important. Having good support system, having people that you can talk to, having people that you can feel like you can exchange information in a confidential way, that's huge. There's no replacement for that.
So this is the start of the year, and you just released the Fatalities Report. So what is your mission through the rest of the year?
Well, so we look at that report, and there are some things that really jump out, and sadly, they're things that we've seen trend up and trend down. So, for example, if you look at firearms fatalities, now we're seeing ambushes start to come back up. When you look at traffic fatalities, we are definitely seeing struck bys coming back again when you see 113% increase over 1 year. So we look at that. Why are our officers being killed? What is happening? Is it the training? Do we not have enough training? Do we need different training? Do we need to look at equipment? Are there emerging technologies that can help us? And just, I think about the very basics, and the very basics begins here. There are no routine anything. So for people who talk about the law enforcement profession, you see it in the media, you certainly see it in movies. They'll say, oh, it was a routine call, a routine traffic stop. No two are ever the same. There is nothing routine about it. And it's the ones that you think are the most routine where complacency begins to creep in. And complacency, there is no room for it in law enforcement. There cannot be. Whether it's approaching a car on the side of the road at a traffic stop, or whether it's directing traffic in the middle of an intersection at a traffic crash. It doesn't matter what it is. There's no complacency. The other component to that is wear and utilize every bit of protective equipment that you have. If you have a reflective vest or reflective gloves, if you have ballistic protection, whether that be a vest that is sort of under the shirt. Some are exterior protectors now. You see that. Whatever it might be, if you have a shield and you're going into a call that calls for a shield, or that there's a potential or a long gun and you have one issued to you, utilize the equipment that you have. You're seeing drones coming out more. Lighting is becoming better when it comes to emergency vehicle lighting. It is incredibly important to access the resources that you have been issued and utilize those, and take your training seriously. When you go to the shooting range, however often your department goes, pay attention, be engaged, listen to the commands, and listen to what you're being taught, because there's an evolutionary process to every bit of training in law enforcement, and it does change. So pay attention and make sure that you stay on top of your game. Most importantly, you have to take care of yourself. You can be of no assistance to anybody else if you are physically, mentally, or spiritually sidelined. You have to be able to take care of yourself first. So make a commitment to yourself. If you haven't taken care of yourself and you're in your 20th year of your career, it's never too late. Get in it now. Reach out, find out what your resources are around you, and have the courage to help yourself, whatever that might be. Could even just be going back to the gym. Be a great time to do it.
Yeah, how important is it to combine physical and mental health?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, I don't. You can't have one without out the other,
Right.
right? So it's very important. And it's funny how you see law enforcement officers coming into a profession and they're in great shape. They're coming out of the academy, they're going to the gym, they're working out, but slowly overtime gets in the way. Now you got a family. You maybe got a specialized assignment that is taking up a lot of your time, and we sort of tend to prioritize the things that should be high priority. We kind of push those down because we want to take care of everybody else, which is what folks that come into law enforcement want to do. They want to take care of everybody else, but you have to be mindful that you have to take care of yourself first.
How can people reach out and learn more?
They can certainly access our website, nleomf.org. They can, once you're on there, all of our contact information. You can email us if you have any questions. Our telephone numbers are listed on there. We are a resource for you. And the most important thing is, so are agencies around you, because if you think that you are living in a rural area and you're isolated, that may be the case. But there are other rural agencies who have built these programs in and baked that into the fabric of their agency. We are here to help you. We can help you make those connections. And we just want people to live a long and healthy life and really have a wonderful career. It's a difficult job, but it is still the greatest job on the planet.